listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up? How you doing? And welcome along to another episode of my show, Straight to Video. Thanks so much for choosing this show with so many great podcasts out there. It's massively appreciated. So I'm going to continue to bring you the best guests out there and have fun chatting about their journey and the experiences they've had. Today is no exception, and it's a chat I've been wanting to do for some time. Let me take you back to the late 80s. As most of you well know, if you listen to this show, then there's a couple of things I regularly mention. My love of hard rock came from buying soundtracks from my favourite films, and from having guests from the series on this show, you'll also know how much of a fan I am of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So, in 1989, when A Nightmare on Elm Street 5 was released, I immediately snapped up the film's soundtrack. On there, alongside an early version of Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, was a track called Heaven in the Backseat from a UK band called Romeo's Daughter. This song would also be released as a single in the UK, accompanied by some of the coolest special editions you will ever find to this day. 7-inch box set with a badge, postcards and sticker, another 7-inch with a weird looking 3D Freddy glove, and finally a 12-inch version with a poster. Of course, I was all over this, but as a bonus, the song was awesome. And no lie, it is still to this day one of my favourite rock songs. Add into the mix a Mutt Lange production, so it sounded like Def Leppard, who I was already listening to, and there was no looking back. Romeo's Daughter would release a follow-up album in 1993 called Delectable, which again was full of great songs, but then the band would disappear until just over 10 years ago when they returned with new material and began to perform live once again. So on today's show, it's a real treat to have a chat with lead singer of Romeo's Daughter, the wonderful Leigh Matty. Leigh shares with us a wild journey of growing up in South Africa before returning to the UK and London. Shortly afterwards, she would answer an ad in Melody Maker, which would see her audition for a brand new rock band and send her on a ride of recording with some of the most famous names in the industry, and also create some of the finest AOR pop rock tunes this country has produced, and they truly are a band we should be proud of. Before our chat, our friends Dead Skull Coffee are serving up listeners to this podcast 15% off their fine rock and roll ground or full bean coffee. Dead Skull Coffee are a true underground and independent business, and your support of them is truly appreciated. Just head on over to deadskullcoffee.co.uk and add the discount code STV on checkout to grab that money off. Please be sure to follow them all over social media too, as they are brewing up some amazing ideas and products. Also, I want to thank everyone who continues to support this show through Patreon. For just a small monthly donation starting at as little as £2.50 a month, you get a bonus podcast, behind-the-scenes access, a private Facebook group, and merchandise you won't find anywhere else. Everything you need to know can be found over at patreon.com/STVpod, and thanks for checking that out. Alright, Leigh and Romeo's Daughter will be on tour all over the UK from this coming weekend, and all dates and information on the band can be found at romeosdaughter.co.uk. But for now, please enjoy my straight-to-video chat with Leigh Matty.
When the beat of your heart is the one true voice that is deafening. If you look to the sky, try to find some sign of divinity. And you don't care much for the rough and tumble of every day. Just something to touch your soul, carry you far away.
God, I had to write some things down. I think of tomorrow, I don't think of like yesterday. So I had to go down and try and remember the stuff.
Is it Aylesbury you're originally from?
I was born in Aylesbury.
Okay.
But my parents moved to Cape Town when I was 2 years old in South Africa. So
wow.
I actually grew up in Cape Town. And then I came back to the UK as soon as I was old enough to do so on my own.
Right. So how many years did you spend in Cape Town?
20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
How was growing up there?
Well, it's very beautiful, but it was obviously it was in the dark ages, But, my dad was offered a great job and he went and, we just kind of lived our lives. And then I got back here I came back here when I was 21 and I started reading all the press and everything that was, because you kind of it was like a very quite an enclosed existence. You didn't really know much about what was going on anywhere else. And then I started reading what was going on. I was absolutely horrified. And I didn't go back for quite a while. My parents had to close up their lives. They moved back here as well. It was much harder for them. I just kind of flitted off as a young, single 21-year-old. It was much more difficult for them.
So in that 20 years, how much exposure did you have of like the UK?
We'd only been back twice. I think once when I was 13 and then not a lot. We didn't come back a lot. It was far and very expensive to travel in those days. So probably only twice, but I just knew I had to come back. I just knew. I'd started singing. I just thought, sod this, I'm going, and I did. And I never looked back, really. So, I've lived here a lot longer than I ever lived there.
So what kind of things were you into as a teenager?
Well, apartheid kind of stopped there were sanctions. So there was a lot of things you couldn't get, a lot of music you couldn't hear, it was weird actually when I was thinking back. So really the stuff I used to listen to was my dad's records that he bought. He loved jazz and stuff. So I didn't really start appreciating rock music and even listening to rock music until I joined Romeo's Daughter, to be absolutely honest. I liked jazz, I liked R&B, I liked pop, and then all of a sudden things changed. And all of a sudden I was thrown into this rock world.
Did you come back on your own then? You say your family came back later, but you moved back on your own.
Yeah, I came on my own.
What was your game plan?
Don't really remember. All I knew was that I wanted to come back to the UK. I wanted to live in London. I lived in numerous shitholes for about 5 years. My mother came to visit me once in one of them, and she walked into this room and she burst into tears because she was so horrified.
What are you doing? Yeah.
She was like, oh my God, it's so awful here. I loved it. It was just off Old Compton Street. And for me, it was just, it was lovely. So, I've loved London. I'm passionate about London. I've loved living in London. Even though I don't live in London anymore, we live in Surrey. When I go into London, I love it. I just loved being in London. And I met Craig probably a year after I got there. So that really formed a lot of my experience as well of London, was meeting the boys.
But you began singing out in Cape Town in South Africa, right? Because didn't you get some kind of record deal there?
I did.
Because I thought that was really random, but now it's all kind of making sense.
Yeah, I got this bizarre record deal with ANC. And not ANC, ANC, the ruling party in South Africa, A&M. I used to be in a cover band. They heard me and they signed me, and I also did theatre as well. I sang in South African West End stuff, and I played Rizzo in Greece and stuff. And I think they saw me in a play, me singing in a play, and they gave me this deal. But I think they wanted me to be I'm not sure. They didn't really know what to do with me. And when I said I'm leaving, I want to leave South Africa, they released me I didn't even end up making an album with them. It was only about a year. So they said, fine, go. So I didn't have any ties at all to South Africa when I left.
Had you been studying over there? Because 20, had you been to college and stuff like that?
Just school, went to school, and then thought I was going to be PR for some reason. I don't know why I chose PR. Went to PR and then college, and I was in a play at the time. I remember the principal of this college came to see me in this play, and he called me into his office the next Monday when I got back into college, and he said, I saw you in the play and I thought you were very good, and I think you're probably wasting your time. I don't know, maybe he just thought I was thick as two short planks and thought I shouldn't stay in PR. But he said to me, I'm not sure you should be doing this. You probably need to go and just be, an actress. I think he thought I wanted to be an actress. So college wasn't for me either, really, even though I was kind of bright enough to do it and I probably could have done whatever I wanted to do. I decided then that I wanted to just sing if anybody wanted me. But then acting, I never acted again after that. Singing, that was for me. That was it. Once I joined, we weren't called Romeo's Daughter for years, but once I joined Craig and Tony, that was it for me. That was my path. And I never really looked back from that.
How was it coming back to England and being dropped into London?
Fantastic.
Was it like a massive
culture shock?
Yeah, culture shock, but also a catch-up period as well. Just so much. I've missed this and I'm just diving into it all.
Absolutely. I was so ignorant about so many things, but Cape Town is quite cosmopolitan. Brighton as a city. And so I knew some very interesting people there. I knew some musicians there. But then I moved to a city called Johannesburg, it's inland Johannesburg. And at the time it was, Cape Town was very kind of pedestrian and they didn't have very many opportunities to sing. And I went to Johannesburg and I joined like this top cover band over there. And I sang there for, I think maybe for about 2 years. I wasn't keen on singing covers though, to be honest, because I think I already had my own kind of style of voice and I found it quite hard to mimic a lot of other people. That's an art form in itself. And I can do some things, but I just thought I'm going to do this. I was only 19, I think, and I got paid really well. And then that was it. I was like, no, I want to leave South Africa and I want to come back to the UK. All my family was here other than my mum and dad. I just came back and I stayed with some friends of my mum and dad who owned a pub outside of London in Holmer Green near Amersham. And they let me stay there and I used to get the train into London. I don't know what I can't really remember what I did, but I would get the train into London. And then I met some friends and then we ended up getting a flat together, blah, blah, blah. Then you get a flat and then that was it. And then I was in London and I ended up living in London for, God, a good maybe 25 years.
Because I guess when you moved there, would that be like mid-80s?
It was 1984. So it was a really interesting time because a lot of change was happening. And I vividly remember the AIDS thing going on. I hadn't been here that long. I can't remember what year that was. You know, that terrifying advert with the big gravestone. It was so terrifying, that advert. That was like a really big thing that I remember from those times because I wasn't really involved. I didn't care about politics or anything like that then. I just wanted to have a great, I was just a young single female in London, finding my feet, making new friends, trying to see what I wanted to do with my life. So the 80s was great, but it was also, I was skint. I had no money. Romeo's Daughter, we didn't get a deal till maybe 87. And then they put us on a tiny retainer. So we all had different jobs. We all did different things. We had like really crappy jobs. So we would meet up at our manager's house on the weekends and we would like write new songs and record. And then we go back to work on a Monday. But when you're young, you don't need money. It's weird.
You get by somehow.
I don't know whether it's different now, but then you really could get away with 100 quid a week. And I never wanted for anything. I always managed to get by. So, I loved it. I remember that time. It was just full of possibility. It was fantastic. High Street Ken Market.
Yeah.
Oh, High Street Ken had the best market for clothes. And I'd go and get all my stage clothes from there. It was absolutely brilliant for clothes.
What were some of the clubs or first bands you saw when you first came to London? Do you remember?
I didn't see many, to be honest, because I didn't have two halfpennies to rub together. And I wouldn't even really known at that point what it was. I used to go clubbing more, but I've never been much of a drinker. So I never kind of did the whole drinking thing. And because I didn't have very much money, I didn't really go out that much. And we worked, once Craig and Tony and I got together, we worked together a lot.
That became the focus.
Absolutely, that became the focus. So I can't really remember. I mean, we must have gone to see some bands.
They couldn't have been that good. They couldn't have blown your mind that much.
I don't remember. I remember clubbing though. I love to go and have a good dance.
So your introduction to Tony and Craig, was it after replying to an ad in Melody Maker?
It was, yes.
Do you remember anything about the ad that caught your eye?
No, I remember that I went for 2 auditions with 2 other bands before I saw that ad. And they either didn't like me or I didn't like them. I can't remember. One was kind of Duran Durani band, which I wasn't keen on. I'm not really that. I don't think I liked the music very much. And maybe they just didn't think I was suited to them. At the time, I looked like a punk rocker. I had very, very short hair and blue nails. And I was going through my punky phase. Not that I was particularly into punk music, but I just kind of looked.
You like the image of it?
The image, yeah. And so I'm not sure what it was that caught my attention with that ad. And I remember that there was this journalist, his name was Joe, and he somehow had something to do with the band at the time. And I have a feeling that he put the ad in Melody Maker. And maybe it said looking for a rock singer. I can't remember, but I remember Craig's number was on this ad. So I rang the number and we probably chatted for like an hour. We got on very well straight away on the phone. And then they called me for this audition at No Miss Studios, which was like the really big in studios at the time in Shepherd's Bush. And I remember I arrived and this whole reception was filled with women with rock, like really rock women, like leather, all the tees, the hairspray, like crazy hair. I turn up, I look like this little punk rocker. And I was the first person that went in to audition. They had given me 3 songs. One of them was Hit Me With Your Best Shot. And the other one was I Want to Know What Love Is, which is quite a clever song, actually, because it starts very low and it goes quite high. I kind of didn't really even know these songs, I don't think. I think I probably heard Hit Me With Your Best Shot. Can't remember what the third track was. Anyway, went in, did the audition. They saw, I think it was like 75 other girls after me over a few days. Olga called me back, who was our manager at the time, Olga Langer, Mutt Langer's ex-wife. It's strange how things work out, really. She called me and she said, the guys really like you and they'd like you to be in the band, but you have to grow your hair. And I was like, oh, all right. That was it, really. I honestly didn't think I'd ever hear back from them because I thought when I went in, I thought I'm not nearly rock and roll enough for these guys after seeing who was waiting. But there were actually very few female-fronted rock bands at the time. There was hardly anybody around.
Definitely in the UK, I can't really think of...
In America, there were loads of women, but in the UK, there was... I can't even think of anybody else who was kind of doing what we were doing. And then obviously our sound was kind of quite different because I say rock, but I always say about rock kind of inverted commas with us because, I don't know, other pretenders rock, which is I think is a good thing, but maybe went against us in the long run in that we didn't actually just fill this box. We weren't rock and we weren't pop. We were somewhere in between, you know. That always went against us with radio play, unfortunately, at the time. So I was very surprised when I heard from them. And then that was it. That was the beginning of, I don't know, so it was maybe 1984, maybe 1985. We signed in 1987. So it was the start of 3 very long years.
Had you done any actual songwriting at that point?
Yeah, maybe bits and bobs when I was in like kids' bands, school bands, you know. I was in a school band, you know. So I started singing probably to an audience quite young, really. I started when I was about maybe 15 or 16. But no, I mean, I had never done anything that was vaguely like what Craig does. And definitely it was my first big band that I thought, okay, even at the time, I had no idea it was going to go on for so long. I mean, it's like been, 30 years or something. Not continuous, but it's quite incredible, really, when I think about it, how we're still going strong. It really blows my mind.
Craig and Tony, I think they've been in a band called Arctic Fox.
That's right, Arctic Fox, yeah.
And that's where the original attention of Mutt Langer's ex-wife Olga had become interested.
She heard them in a pub or something. And so quite bizarre, really, because she'd never managed a band before. So I have no idea where that came from. As far as I know, she'd never managed a band before. But she was kind of involved in very much the early days of our formation. And she was very instrumental, obviously, in Mutt finally hearing about us. He wasn't going to waste his time, you know, with these 3 very wet behind the ears musicians. But finally, he did listen to, it was just on one song that we did called Stay With Me Tonight. And that was a song. And he thought, okay, they've got a sound. So I don't know what it was. Maybe she bullied him. Maybe she just unrelentingly bullied him into doing it. But actually, Mutt is not the kind of person to be bullied by anybody. So
no.
Whatever reason it was, he heard something in that one song and he begrudgingly said, okay, I'll do this one song with you. And then actually it ended up being, you know, half the album.
So you guys had like a double punch with the production on your first release. You had both John Parr, who you initially worked with, on your demo, and then Mutt came in once you headed in to record the album.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you get a chance to have a meeting with them beforehand, or was it boom, in the studio, away you go?
Well, John, I think we'd met. We knew John. And John really wanted to work with Mutt. It was his dream to work with Mutt.
John Parr, who sold millions of records.
Yes, I know. Everybody wanted to work with Mutt. Mention Mutt's name and people would like bow, you know, it's like, I'm not worthy. I didn't even really know who he was, to be honest. Anyway, I treat everybody the same. Rob, I met the Queen, I'd be respectful, but she's just, you know, I don't treat anybody differently. But anyway, so we met Mutt and then it just kind of grew from there. And then he had this fabulous studio in his house. He used to live near Guildford and we ended up going out there and we would stay there. Weekends we would go and we would start, and then we started laying down the tracks. That became our routine. We would just work solidly. It was knackering. I mean, he wasn't that keen working with female singers. His other wife before Olga was a fantastic session singer called Stevie, and he'd worked with her, but he hadn't really professionally worked with many female singers. So he was a bit like, you know, and he worked me really, really hard. But, you know, we got on very well and he always got what he wanted from me, I think. And yeah, I would go in and I would be in the box for hours and hours because he's such a perfectionist. But I learned a lot and it definitely formed our sound. And how we do things, what we learnt in his studio in Guildford is just priceless. You know, we could never have got that with anybody else. It was quite an extraordinary experience, but you only kind of see it afterwards in hindsight, and you look back and go, wow, I didn't really realize at the time how momentous that was. And now I do.
Had Hysteria become the monster album which it went on to be?
Yes. Yeah.
Because I think it took a while before that exploded in the UK.
It did. I think it really did. And he had started very much to, you know, a lot of the ways he worked with Def Leppard was kind of the way he worked with us. I mean, he went on to work with Bryan Adams, but that was even different because Bryan Adams' stuff wasn't really like ours. You know, it's like a solo singer, and wasn't like maybe as layered. The whole thing about Matty was his layering. You know, it was like incredible how he would just make these amazing sounds. And his voice, because obviously he would sing. He would do backing vocals. Craig is obviously singing on all the backing vocals on our first album, but so is Mutt. So Mutt had that incredibly distinctive sound, which he put on every album he's ever worked with, really, but a lot with Def Leppard.
Yeah, a lot of people say that Bryan Adams album he did, the Waking Up the Neighbours, it sounds like Bryan Adams being backed by Def Leppard.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that everybody sounds like they've been backed by Def Leppard when Mutt's singing, you know. Then I think what was quite interesting, I mean, I might be wrong, but I think a lot of people have mentioned this as well, you know, because he went on to marry Shania Twain and work with Shania Twain. A lot of people say that the first Shania Twain album sounded a lot like Romeo's Daughter album. So I think maybe stuff that he also used with us and he worked with us, he took over there, even though she was country. So there are these similarities with his, you know, with his work and his sound. I don't think that holds anymore. I think it's quite different, the stuff he does now. But in that time, the 80s and the 90s, that was, you know, his wonderful, wonderful time where you would hear a Mutt album or a song, you'd know straight away it was his.
I mean, how crazy is that you recognize an album because of who produced it?
Very rare. Absolutely. Yeah, I think very, very rare. So we were very honored and ignorant, and maybe good. Maybe it's good that we were like that because we were so happy to be there and to be working on these songs, and we just embraced everything. We had no expectations. Just went there and did it. And then we got given this album at the end, you know, and we were like, wow, we were like, oh, is that any good? We've never been like particularly confident about us.
I think that's musicians in general.
Yeah,
though,
maybe you're right. Yeah.
Romeo's Daughter was a band that focused on its songwriting and recording before you got the chance to perform live, really. So was that nerve-wracking for you? How do we recreate this?
Our first major gig was at the Marquee, and we only had an album's worth of songs, 10 songs. That we could play. I think if I remember correctly, we actually redid in the encore, we redid 2 songs. Like, I think it was Wild Child has always been an encore. We had so few songs, it was absolutely ridiculous. It was the Great Marquee in Wardour Street. It had moved from where it was before. It was in Wardour Street and it was sold out. Our first gig was sold out.
Who was on the bill with you? Do you remember?
No.
Ring Craig.
Craig, who's on the bill? I found a tour pamphlet it was all photocopied, and every gig was written, every date and where we had to be and what time we had to be in. And I wrote little notes at the bottom. I found it the other day. I haven't seen it for years. It was from our first tour. And I wrote what I felt about every gig. And I was like, oh no, that wasn't very nice. Sound wasn't very good. What did I know? I didn't know anything. But the Marquee was pretty phenomenal. And I was pretty gobsmacked because before we went on stage, and we were absolutely bricking it. I mean, really, it was so frightening. And I could hear this. They were chanting, going, Leigh. They were chanting my name. And I was like, how the hell do they even know my name? So obviously the press and the whole buzz about us must have been pretty good.
How long had the album been out? Do you remember?
No. In fact, hold on. Wait a minute. I'm going to get the little booklet. I can tell you. I'll give you some dates. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay. Okie dokie. So here we go. July 1989. And actually, it wasn't our first gig. Our first gig was at the Buckley Tivoli on Thursday, the 6th of July. And then here we go. July 1989. It was on a Wednesday the 12th. That was our first gig. My goodness. And here we go. Marquee. I'm just seeing if it says who the support was. No, it doesn't say who the support was. It says who the promoter was, though. My goodness, I haven't seen that man's name for a long time. I put here, shall I read what I put on the notes here?
Please.
I put here, yeah. Tube strike today. Did manage to get 450 people in. Quite a good show.
Quite a good show. All right. Not a bad turnout. How was your confidence at those gigs? Did you settle into it?
No.
Did you enjoy it, or was you terrified?
I was so terrified that Craig used to do the talking in between the songs. It was a rather bizarre thing. Our manager said, "Oh yes, no, I think Craig should do it because Craig's had more experience." So I would sing the song and then Craig would talk. And after a while, we're like, this is probably not working very well. But the talking bit is sometimes the most nerve-wracking bit. Well, you know that, don't you, when you're on stage? You have to think of something interesting to say or something, I don't know. Sometimes you go completely blank. You have no idea what to say. I think my confidence would have grown much quicker if we'd have toured more. We were so stop and start with our touring. We did one big tour, then we supported FM. And I don't think we toured again for like another, I don't know how many years. Our management and the record company, they had this weird thing. They didn't want us to tour abroad. We were offered tours in Japan. We were offered to tour in Australia. We never went anywhere or did any of that. I think they just wanted us to they wanted to kind of push us as this and just sell albums and do it the album way and do TV shows and all of that. But actually, it was not great for us because we never really had the chance to really hone our talent on stage because we were never really given that opportunity very much. I'm not sure why.
Record company logic. There's never any sense behind it.
Record company logic and management, few mistakes made in that way. And I mean, we've toured much more since we reformed than we ever did then.
Yeah, how crazy is that?
And now how much more difficult it is to tour. You know, then there were gigs everywhere. We literally would get into the white transit van. I sometimes sit in the back, you know, have a little chair in the back, in the front. Off we go to our gigs. And there was so much more opportunity to gig then. Now, I think fans don't understand how difficult it is to book a tour. You have to have a reason to book a tour. You can't just go, we want to go and play. I mean, just getting people to come down and see you.
Yeah. Well, I think you're on this upcoming tour. You're doing like the sensible thing to do now. I think you're doing is it like Fridays and Saturdays or Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays?
It's the only way we can do it. You know, after this awful pandemic that we've all been through, that in itself now is scary because you think, is anybody going to come? And so you have that pressure as well on you. You have a lot of gigs that are closed. And so you think, my God, well, I mean, what's it like for new bands starting out? Where do they go play? They've got no fan base. We can book a tour and you have to take a chance that it's going to be okay. And so you might have one gig and maybe not many people go, but you have the next night and a lot of people go. So it balances itself out. And as the band like ourselves who bring out albums, we have to tour and we love to tour, but it's really, really scary because you can lose your pants. You know, nobody comes, the promoter doesn't want to pay you. You have to pay for hotels, for crew. It's really, really a very, very difficult thing now to do. It brings a heightened sense of stress, really.
It'll be great. Everything works out one way or another. When we spoke a few years ago, when I was doing my straight to video radio show, we were speaking about Heaven in the Backseat, and the video, it has this perfect MTV sheen to it, but it was actually filmed in the UK.
Yeah, it was. It was made for MTV, though. It was a real pity, actually, if I remember correctly, what happened with MTV, because it was like this amazing vehicle for bands to get known. And obviously with the Nightmare on Elm Street connection, it was quite a big budget. We made it in some really big warehouse in London somewhere. And MTV loved it, as far as I'm aware, in America. And they loved it. And they wanted to do something not more than just the video with us. I think at the time they would work with bands and they would maybe get us in and they would film us live. But I think they wanted some money for it. And the record company said, no, we really lost a great opportunity because I think at the time we would have been a really fantastic MTV band. We were young and, you know, fresh and our look and our sound.
Oh, 100%. I mean, everything. You had the film tie-in.
Yeah.
And the music at the time, you still had a few years before that big music change.
Absolutely.
You could have dropped straight in with the rock sets.
Absolutely.
And all that kind of stuff. It'd have been perfect.
It was another very, very big missed opportunity. You know, especially when we went to the States, the three of us, you would go and do a radio tour. We were picked up at the airport and we would fly to all these different cities and we would go to the rock radio stations and be interviewed. We did quite a few of them. It was just amazing. It was so exciting. I'd been to America before, but Craig and Tony had never been before. So they were like, whoa, we're in America. We would go in limos. You know, they drove us everywhere in limos. And we got to Los Angeles, and in Tower Records in Los Angeles, which is on Sunset, we went in there and there was a huge cardboard cutout of me in Tower Records promoting our album. And we were just like these little moments, you thought, like, my God, we were on the verge of really cracking America. We charted and we did things that were quite extraordinary, really, considering the amount of time we'd been together, and it never happened and nobody ever pushed it enough for it to happen.
So many things have got to come together.
Absolutely.
How was it hearing Eddie Money covering Heaven in the Backseat?
God, that was so bizarre. Such a bizarre cover as well. I mean, a lot of our songs of the first album have been covered, but the Eddie Money one, it was quite interesting. I quite liked Eddie Money, but I thought it was a bit odd, his version of it.
Makes you wonder how that got on his radar.
Probably through the publishing company, through Jive. They were a very big publisher and at the time, and maybe they were just pushing it out to a lot of different companies. I mean, I've lost track of how many different covers have been on different songs on our album. I mean, Craig will know.
How was it hearing Hart singing one of your songs? I mean, that for you, that must have been pretty awesome.
That was amazing. That was really amazing. Craig and I went to go and see them at Wembley, and we were running late, and they were on stage, and we walked into the venue to try and find our seats, and they started playing Wild Child. It was the first song that they played, and we were like, oh my God, it was, yeah. And they did a great version. I mean, I love their version. Oh, that was so exciting. That was wonderful. And interestingly, I heard this story about Heart, that their last tour here before they split up, they played at the Royal Albert Hall, and FM were supporting them. So I went along. They didn't play Wild Child. It was kind of a bit underwhelming, their set, for some reason. I'm not sure why. Maybe it wasn't a great night for them. I'm not sure. Maybe it was the choice of songs. They've got such a huge selection of songs, and sometimes, you don't pick. Anyway, Blow Me Down. They go to Manchester and they open the set with Wild Child. They hadn't played it for years. So, yeah. So, it's so flattering. And for Craig, I mean, Craig is just such a phenomenal songwriter. He just nails it. And it's so lovely that people listen to our music and go, oh, I'd like to do a version of that,
It's still great stuff you guys are putting out. Are you recording at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a bit of a photo the other day.
2 more songs to finish and we're finished. I'm so excited about our new album. All the songs are finished. I've just got 2 more vocals to record. So we're ready to rock. We've got the album cover. We know the name. We're ready. We're ready. So we'll definitely have a new album out this year.
Outside of the band, you gravitated into voiceover work. Can I ask how you got involved in that and how that whole journey has been?
Yeah, well, when Romeo's Daughter, when we kind of took a break from each other, when we were just, I think we got to the point where we were like, well, this is really not working anymore. And how much longer can we just keep on trying to bash down doors that really aren't open to us? And I think it was time for a change. I think we'd been together for maybe 10 or 11 years, and it was just time. It was for me anyway. It was just time just to have a break. I think all of us, I think we were very disillusioned about things. And I decided, I don't know what overtook me, but I decided I was going to just do something completely different. And I started working for this voiceover agency, and I went on to be very successful as an agent. I don't do them myself. I represent actors who do voiceovers. And then about 8 years into that, I decided I was going to start my own company. And so in 2005, I started Just Voices Agency. And yeah, it's fantastic. I've got a wonderful agency. I represent wonderful acts and people and presenters and actors. And it's my baby, and it's gone on to be pretty successful. And I'm very grateful for it, because it enabled me to kind of not think too much about, oh God, why am I doing why am I singer? Why aren't I, I think it baffles me a little bit that I was able to not sing for so long though, because I also got ill. I got breast cancer in 1998, which wasn't great. And that kind of also focused me on getting my health back. Suddenly
priorities and things changed.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. And so my priorities did change, and I just thought, I need to just make a living. And so that path for me was an odd one, because I'd never been an agent before. I'd never done anything like that ever before, but I really took to it, and it's gone on. And it's fantastic that I now have such a successful agency that I can now go back to Romeo's Daughter and do what I want, when's needed. And I have fantastic staff, and that's worked out really, really well for me. It's given me a lot of freedom, not working for somebody else. There's nothing like being your own boss.
And how many of your clients have been out to a gig?
I tend not to tell that many about it, just because, I don't know, it's a weird thing. I'm their agent, and then you're saying, oh, I'm a singer as well, come to my gig. You know what I mean? It's a bit like naff, I think. But some are huge fans. Some have become like really, really big fans. But no, a lot of them don't know. They'd be so gobsmacked if they came to see us. They'd be like, what? They just used to me being Leigh.
Finding old copies of Kerrang with you as like a poster in there and stuff.
As a pin-up.
Yeah.
I know.
That's awesome. Thanks ever so much for chatting to us, Leigh. I've loved speaking to you, and good luck on the tour.
Thank you so much, Rod. I'm sorry if I've waffled. I'm such a waffler.
Wafflers are great.
I'm a good waffler. It's an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really lovely to chat to you and to see you again.
Massive thank you to Leigh Matty for such a lovely chat right here on the Straight to Video podcast. Remember, if you're listening to this on its release, Romeo's Daughter will be out on tour all over the UK from this weekend. Dates and venues can be found at romeosdaughter.co.uk, and I'll maybe see you at one of those shows, so please come and say hello. That is all for today's episode. Don't forget that new shows are released every Tuesday and Friday, or you can check out stvpod.com for all 160 plus episodes of the show to date, along with some straight to video music, videos and merchandise. So until we chat again, hope you've had fun, and I look forward to speaking again real soon.